guys, it's Miss Stefan. I just wanted to give you some quick notes about plot structure. And first of all, we're going to start by defining what plot structure is. Plot structure is the organization of events in the novel or short story. So it's not the events themselves, but how the author arranges them within the story. You're probably familiar with this diagram here. This is a typical, traditional, linear plot structure. You have your exposition, your rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. And you can plot all the points on this it's called a Freytag's model, but you can plot them all on this model. This is a traditional structure, but an author does not have to use a traditional structure. So as you're reading The Book Thief, for example, you've probably picked up that this is not a traditional structure. There are two different types of structure that we're going to talk about for this class in particular, and that is linear structure and nonlinear. A linear structure is just what it sounds like. The events are given in a chronological order. So just think of a line, all right? There's a beginning of a line, there's a middle to the line, and there's usually an end to the line. Everything falls into that line. So that's going to be your Freytag model. That's going to be your exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, denouement. Everything goes in a straight line. Nonlinear, however, is much different. Events are given out of chronological order. This is often used to mimic the structure of human memory and/or establish tension in the narrative. So what it will often do is create suspense for the reader because it's not often clear what the narrator is talking about since events are not being given chronologically. So thinking on The Book Thief, you can probably tell this is a non-linear structure. Our narrator is giving us events kind of like the human mind would remember them. So some techniques that you should be on the lookout in a non-linear plot would be flashback. A flashback is when an author presents materials that occurred earlier than the present tense of a narrative. So a narrator is telling the story, and then they'll begin to tell a story that happened prior to that present time. Same with a flash forward. It's when an author presents material that has yet to happen and intrudes on the present narrative of the time. So foreshadowing is a type of flash forward. It's where you're giving hints to what's to come that hasn't happened yet. Then we have in medias res. In medias res is Latin, and it means in the middle of things. An author begins the story when the action has already started rather than at the exposition of the plot. So think of our Freytag model where it starts with exposition, where you get your setting and your character and your central conflict, and then it moves into the climax. It moves into that action. And medias res starts with that action. So if you remember back to freshman year when you probably read the Odyssey begins in medias res. It begins when Odysseus is already on his way home and tells the story in a series of flashbacks to what happened along that journey. Parallel plot is another technique you should be familiar with. It's when a narrative structure is in two or more stories, and they often involve a common theme. So there's one story going on, and at the same time there's a second story going on. These are parallel plots. The larger narrative may shift back and forth between those parallel stories. So what I want you to do is think about what techniques, since I already told you that The Book Thief is nonlinear, what techniques have you seen Markus Zusak use in The Book Thief? All right, flashback, flash forward, in medias res, or parallel plot, or a combination of those.